Mayor, Jenna, you can hear me? This work study was requested by Councilmember Krupa. So the purpose of the work study is to review the current procedures and municipal code sections for how we establish street names within the city of Hemet. Consider Councilmember Krupa's, she made a suggestion to the city manager and I to have the potential to have a master list of pre-approved street names that would include historic Hemet names or longtime residents, and direct staff to prepare a code amendment and a resolution as may be desired by the council. So let's talk about streets. Typical circumstances in which you're going to name streets, they're usually done at the time a new subdivision is approved and before that map is recorded. And then if those names are assigned, the final map gets recorded, goes to the county recorders, and that's how those names are established. Most of the times for new subdivisions, the names are coming from the developers. Other instances, and you have one on your agenda later tonight, is where you have the name of an existing street is requested to be changed for some reason. This is accomplished by a council resolution or a certificate of correction, which needs to be submitted to the county surveyor and county clerk and recorded so that it transfers onto all the future maps throughout the city. So our current procedure is that this is in the municipal code section. The developer submits the proposed street names and alternate names to the building official with the map showing the location of the proposed streets. The building official circulates those names to the various departments for comment and schedules the proposed review by the Traffic and Parking Commission. The commission's recommendations are then forwarded to the city council for approval, and the city engineer forwards a list of approved street names to the building official for processing and assignment of addresses to the structures. The street names are recorded with the county on the final map, if that's what occurred, or by separate resolution of the city council. So the approval criteria in the ordinance set before the planning commission is that they're to review the names and all comments received and approve the street names subject to the following 4 criteria. That the streets are a prolongation or approximate prolongation of an existing city street or county street. Makes sense, you know, that the entire street would be given the same name. That there are no conflicts or similarities with existing city or county streets or in the city's sphere of influence with respect to spelling or sound. And this is mostly for public safety or emergency response, so that there's clear definition. The number of letters in the street name shall not exceed 14 characters. I'm guessing that's because that's how big the sign is. And generally, I think that's pretty typical. And then, so those 3 criteria are pretty measurable, right? Pretty much anybody, you know, it either is or it isn't on those 3. So the last one is that the name shall be in the best interest of the public health, safety, and general welfare, which is the discretion of the commission or the council. Potential changes for discussion. One coming from myself and the building official is to amend the code to have the street naming process administered by the city engineer instead of the building official, and here's why. Everything else associated with the map or with the streets resides with the engineering department. They're recording the final map, they're submitting it to the recorder, they're processing that. Inserting the building official in the process is just an awkward. Now, where the building official appropriately comes in is once the street is named and now you need to address those structures, that is definitely within the building official's purview and correct responsibilities. Consider amending the criteria to allow more discretion or additional criteria in the selection process, if you so desire. Adopt a council resolution of street names or themes that developers and owners could select for as an option, and I think this is intended to get to Councilmember Krupa's point. So in that, rather than putting it in the ordinance, which would require an ordinance amendment, if you adopted a separate resolution, that could be updated and amended from time to time very easily without, you know, an onerous process and codification within the code. One of the things you might want to consider is if that is a recommended or list of pre-approved hey, developers, if you don't have any ideas, here's some themes, or here's some names that have already been vetted by the city, and maybe that could even be part of a streamlined process that wouldn't have to go to the Traffic and Parking Commission as a separate item, as a suggestion. Consider if the city wants to offer street names for charity fundraising purposes. A lot of other cities will do this. Now, we haven't had a lot of new streets come online for a while, but as development picks up and you do get new subdivisions, a lot of times at a community auction or nonprofit, there might be an opportunity to name a street name after someone, provided that it follows the criteria. Clarify and streamline the street naming process for final maps. Again, maybe in some of these kind of pre-vetted names or processes. I think taking the building, I'm going to make that push again, taking the building official out of that, I think will help streamline that. And this is not just a selfish request. I think it just makes more sense. And any other ideas that the council might have for us to consider that, or direction in terms of amending the existing code or adopting a resolution. And that concludes my presentation.
Thank you. Linda, since you were the
since I started this,
seed planter on this.
Yeah, actually this came about from a request from and I believe they're at least third generation Valley residents, and I'm blanking on the name. Severin? Was it Severin? It's got an insurance agency in town, I think. Yeah. And that was, is this something the city ever does or did or would consider? And that just got me thinking. And when you get down to the fundraising, charity fundraising purposes, we used to do that. Each year, I think it was for Valleywide, that one of the auction items would be your street name. And I believe the last person that got one of those was Tom Garnella, and he wanted a street named, I believe, after his wife's family. And I don't know that I don't think it's been done yet, because it was probably at least 6 years ago. But I think something like that, coming up with, and having suggestions from, if we can publicize this, from some of the older families or whatever in the Valley. We do have some. I mean, Whittier, Johnston, Mayberry, these names, and I know we've got a lot of family names around. But I think it's just something that we really need to consider as a council to, we're an old community, we need to honor the people that have been here and have for generations and generations.
So I would suggest too, if you do decide to have charity fundraising potential names, that that's also a good reason to have a resolution or at least have a master list, because right now, staff changes and it's somebody's memory, and so to have a repository of this is, this is when this was added to the list, or, we would like to have this, named at the next opportunity. Some guidance could be in the resolution.
I think anytime we can streamline is a good time.
Yes, and take the building official out of it. Sorry, Sarah.
And it just makes complete sense to have it run through engineering, because engineer's already the one looking at the streets and the maps and all that stuff, and it's part of that process instead of going back and forth across the street. So I think that's a good move. I think having a resolution is going to be a good thing, because then, like Deanna said, there's something to go back to if people leave. But yeah, I like all these ideas. Any other comments?
Yeah, I have, I guess, a question that may lead to a suggestion, if it isn't already being done. I know that in a lot of communities, there'll be a theme, particularly in a single development, where maybe it's an Hispanic theme to all the street names, or maybe it's named after U.S. presidents or something. From a public safety perspective, it's my observation that it makes it much more efficient for first responders if there are developments where there is some common theme, because as you're learning the city, especially if you're training a new officer, You can say, all right, this section of homes here, those are all U.S. presidents. And if you go north to south, they're alphabetical, or east to west, they're alphabetical. Those kinds of concepts. And I don't know if that's a strategy or tactic that city engineers use, or if it's something that developers use. If it's not codified somewhere, I think some component of that would be very beneficial when you're thinking of first responders, because that makes it much easier, and even for people to find their way around town once they become more familiar with which particular part of town. Oh yeah, those are all presidents' names, those are all names of states, those are all colleges. And I see some examples of that existing now, but it's a little helter-skelter. So, as we've already said, this is an older town, but going forward, I think that might be something that would be very beneficial to us.
We could certainly mention that in the ordinance, or at least a preference for themes within tracts, and then add some suggested themes to the resolution.
Yeah, especially if they have some significant linkage to Hemet's history.
I have a question for you. I don't know how it's been done in the past or what we're, exactly trying to get to. Are we not wanting people to pick their own names, or is it just these are going to be a list also? You know what I'm saying? Because some people come in with good ideas for their tracks, or they name it after, character traits or family members. I've seen all different
I
kinds.
think from a staff perspective, we would recommend that this be an option, and that maybe the incentive be, if it's already pre-vetted, then there isn't the need to go through a separate step through the Traffic and Parking Commission. But I wouldn't restrict it, because sometimes they may have a perfect name that means a lot to them.
And even if there's enough criteria that say, we're not going to even if you don't take the suggested ones, but we would like to see, certain theme, structure, exactly. Yeah. So, okay.
Direction for staff.
Pardon me?
Do you need any more direction?
Do I need any more direction, Alan? Do you want a motion for consensus, or I think I got what you needed, and we can work on that.
Ask me, I think that's excellent.
Okay.
I heard the conversation and coming back to something.
So then you've got enough that you can bring it back for a vote
Yes,
at a
I
later
do.
date.
Thank you so much.
And you can have Deanna Iliano Street as number one choice.
Afraid what would happen.
Thank you, Deanna. Longer street names. Yeah, I think the street signs are pretty big enough now. Right. All right. We do have somebody that wants to comment. Tim Moran, are you still here?
Actually, Mr. Moran had to leave. He represents Gosh Auto Dealership, and it's later on the agenda.
He's going to come back and speak.
But
Maybe.
he had to leave, but he gave me some input that I can share with you at that item.
Okay. Thank you. All right. With that, we are going to recess into closed session, and then will we be back at 7 o'clock?